Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thanks. First of all, we'd like to thank KAUST for this kind invitation and hospitality, and for initiating this first meeting on radiation protection and safety, which I think the first of its kind in the kingdom. The topic, as we can see, non-medical human imaging, which I give it abbreviation NMHI, justification, ethics, and regulations. Okay. Well, let's first define what the non-medical human imaging, and then I will say what I'm going to focus on. From the name, I think it's clear that we are talking about something non-medical, but we are using the medical equipment sometimes. So it's a non-medical human. This is defined by the European Commission that any deliberate exposure mean will be something planned exposure of humans for imaging purposes, where the primary motivation for making that exposure is not related to health. That is the main thing, is not related to health and well-being of the individual being exposed. Okay, so what is the new about this kind of practice? So it is not medical, it is not related to industry, it is not related to any power generation. So this is some kind of practice that the regulatory bodies and the governments are concerned about. The IEA in safety or general safety guide number 5, they said explicitly decisions on their justification are left to the national government or regulatory body. Well, my talk actually split in 2 parts. One is about that part, the justification, and where these justifications lie in the radiological protection system, and then I will move on to the non-medical human imaging. When I started just preparing this or picking up the title or the topic for this webinar, I just realized that we'll have, I think, a number of audiences, probably more than 300, I believe, from different from different sectors. So what kind of information, knowledge about radiation protection that I think, from my experience that I've been in radiation physics, radiation protection for maybe since 2000, and there's some gaps or misunderstanding, sometimes underestimating some part of the radiation protection system. What is it? It's lie under the justification. So let's start with the definition or the objective of our, well, let's start with this phrase. This phrase saying, radiation protection is not mainly a matter for science. So if it is not matter for science, so who other people that this radiation protection would be matter for them? This saying actually comes from one of the pioneer. His name is Lawson Taylor. He died in 2004, and who co-founder of ICRP. What he said in one of his remarkable speech, radiation protection considerations go well beyond science into philosophical, sociological, political, economic, and moral areas. So we are not only talking about science when we talk about radiation protection. I know the science is very important. Our regulations are based many on the science evidence, but it's not only about science. So what he said there are 3 parts that constitute our regulations, our system of radiological protection. And these are science, which we are all talk about in our programs, our education. But there's some other parts which sometimes are missing and misunderstood, or as I said, overlooked, which is the ethics and the societal values, which I'm going to go through it just in a minute. And the experience. So experience, science, and ethical all together has to combine and constitute our regulations. Okay, sometimes we ignore the ethics and sometimes the experience, and okay, I'm doing the right thing. No, we are missing some of the pillar of radiation protection. So what these pillars, you will come to it. So What is radiation protection? What is the objective of radiation protection? Why we are here? What the radiation protection specialists are doing? Actually, I would summarize it in this very short sentence. Radiation protection regulations are designed to prevent deterministic effects and minimize the probability of stochastic effects. Prevention, so those who are not familiar with the deterministic and the stochastic deterministics, it's something that has a threshold, has a dose. Once you exceed that dose, so there will be kind of effects, biological effects that can be shown, that occurs normally at high doses. So, alhamdulillah, the radiological protection system is preventing that such kind of deterministic effects will occur. But we don't say preventing the stochastic effects. We are saying minimizing. There's no way to prevent the stochastic effects. The stochastic effects, by the way, mainly it's cancer and genetic effects. Why we cannot prevent the stochastic effects? Because the ICRP are relying on the model of LNT, linear no-threshold model. What they said very strong statement and very hard fact, which is, I think, this one. What they said, harm can occur at any dose level or any level of dose. That means the probability of developing cancer can occur whatever the dose that you have, the probability of cancer is there. There is no threshold after which the cancer will occur. That is a very hard fact. Unfortunately, this is what ICRP actually adopting and following. If there is a threshold for the stochastic effect, I think things will be much, much easier. So I'm just have the speed meters just to present and see. People, I think they will understand when they say the speed meter. So, I mean, if you're driving maybe even 5 kilometers or 1 kilometer per hour, there's a probability of risk. Even if, as you increase the speed, the probability of developing cancer will also increase. Not only this, what they said also, very small exposure when you summit, it equals to single exposure, one single large exposure, okay? They both cause the same stochastic health effects. Can you imagine? So it's either you divide it into small parts or you have it in one shot, it's the same probability of effects. So the conclusion of this, persons must be protected from ionizing radiation at all those levels. There is no single, okay, so we'll see what we are actually paying the price for this kind of conclusion, because this is the system of the international or ICRP or the IAA or the system of radiation protection. Oh, sorry. I'm having the sound is go because now no, for you, maybe for the audience behind the screen. Okay, okay. Because now I had this. Okay. So that is very, very hard facts, and all the radiation protection system are based on these facts. Okay. Since someone will also this in a minute, but okay. These 3 general principles of radiation protection, Engineer Mohammed just mentioned very quickly, which is I call them the pillar of radiation protection system. What they are, or what are they? The first one is the justification. You are not allowed to use or practice or adopt any ionizing radiation unless it produces a sufficient benefit to the exposed individual or society to offset the radiation harm that it may cause. You have to have a proper justification in order to do so. And I just give it a red line, so a red light. So you cannot cross, you cannot go ahead until you present a justification, which is procedure that we have to follow, which is not something easy. The problem about justification is what? It's not something easy. It's a subjective concept. It's not something science-based. Because it's a subjective concept, we need an ethical decision-making. So what I consider to be right, some other people will say, no, this is a risk for me, but it's beneficial for me. So it has to be like a debate or negotiation or convincing between the two parties. Once you have the justification, you prove it, you go to the next step with the optimization. The optimization, okay, now you are allowed, fine, you go, but before you go, you have to really show me that you actually have the magnitude of dose received, the magnitude of dose received, the number of people exposed, and the likelihood of unnecessary exposures are kept as low as reasonably achievable. The problem that we face, and I think NRRC, they know this, people saying, okay, why I am using a radiation equipment with very low dose, a minimum dose, and sometimes within the background, within the background, why I'm not allowed to use it? Say, okay, no, you have to have justification. So it's very important to know. The third one is the application of those limits, which is now you have the right, but please watch the speed limit. Now, this is another one to show the importance of justification. This graph is, you see, it's 1987. The dose per individual was 3.6 millisievert per year and constitute only 3 millisieverts from the natural background and 0.7 from mankind, or from man-made, radiation, which is basically medical radiation. After 20 years, what's happened? That number increased up twice. So now instead of 3.6, now becomes 6.2 millisievert per year. And the radiation, the natural, as you see, does not actually change very much. What it changed is the medical exposure. The medical exposure becomes almost 3 times or 4 times more. The question, why is it more? The study, the research showed in the United States that third of this dose, 3 millisieverts, actually is unjustified. So there's many practices in the medical hospitals are unjustified. So the justification is sometimes ignored for some reason. The non-medical human exposure, there's 2 categories. One, the first category we call the medical equipment, that the exposure is done in a medical radiation facility and is run and assisted by radiologists or radiological or medical personnel. The second one is the exposure is done in a non-medical facility, and the image that we are getting are assessed by the non-medical staff, and each one has a different procedures. And there's an example here we see now in a minute. The security screening of passengers is from the second category. There's 2 types: backscattered radiation, X-ray and transmission X-ray, and electromagnetic waves. You see the backscatters produce less dose than the transmission X-ray images. So there's for the smuggling body, sorry. And for this is for the backscatter, this one, with the guy with the gun. Okay. So there's justification assessment that we have to go through it. Unfortunately, because of the time limit, we will not be able to say everything. Security screening for vehicles is another part and important issue for non-medical imaging. It's really important. It's nice. I mean, it's good to have such a system, but be careful. You have to go through a certain procedure to justify your work. Are you going to scan all people that are going through that gate? No. So how many people are going to? Sometimes maybe all of us can be scanned and we are not really doing any harm to the country or to the customs, whatever. Okay, that's those determination scenario for flights. You can see that the number can go up to 0.4 millisieverts, 0.6 millisieverts, which exceeds the 0.25 millisievert established for this kind of practices. Justification process. This is a tedious work, a long way to go. It's not something that we can do it in one meeting. So we have to gather all the information, input data, surveys, experience. First of all, define the need. What is your threat? The probability that threat will occur. Once you define your need, then you go to the evaluation. So what kind of equipments, devices, techniques that you need to have in order to solve your problem? So you have to show that kind of evaluation and to evaluate that technique that you want to. Is it ionizing or non-ionizing? Has any environmental impact or not? And then we go to the third step, which is the evaluation and privacy concerns. Lastly, we have the benefit risk analysis, which is also very, very important, but it has to go this way, not the other way around. Okay, this is a weighing risk benefit. One thing just to see here, I want to say that for medical, the patient are exposed to radiation, fine, but he's at risk, but at the same time, he is benefiting from the radiation. Whereas for non-medical imaging, so the person is actually exposed to radiation and he's at risk, but he is not benefiting from that radiation. So we have to provide some justification. If I am, for example, working at the customs or the airport, I have to say something about this. Okay, in MIH, it's going to be used. I believe that for the vision of 2030, we may expect more people coming to the country, tourists, investors, pilgrims, customs. So customs and borders, airports, maybe building more railways, drugs and weapons inspection, pre-employment health assessment, sports. So all these sometimes we may need to make some inspection for them. Conclusion remarks, that's the final slides. Okay, radiological protection system, guys, is designed not to restrain you from using radiation techniques. That's the message that we want to deliver to the audience. We are here to help you and encourage you to use radiation techniques. However, we want to use them safely and efficiently. Justification comes before optimization, not the other way around. Periodic justification must be, or assessment is required. It's not only one step or one dime. So from time to time, you have to go through it. Decision-making is based on ethical requirements and experience, not on science. That is the hard, the difficult part of this bill. Even, and this is something that people actually ignore it. Even when the doses will be below the public dose limit, justification and optimization must be implemented. Don't say that I have a low dose. No way. No need for justification. I mean, people are safe. The radiological protection system doesn't work like this. It works at first one, justification, second one, optimization, third one is implementing of the dose limits. Lastly, radiation protection specialists need to develop skills such as analytical thinking, critical thinking, reasoning, problem solving, and risk analysis. These things, actually, some kind of skills, we ignore it sometimes. We teach our students. I think the program itself, sometimes we omit such kind of important skills in this one. Lastly, in a nutshell, and summarize the whole presentation, that we have justification, which is a curvature road. It's not something straight that we can want. A lot of factors that we have in our way to reach and to apply them. When we get the license, or get at least authorized, or we have the good justification, we can move on to the ALARA and those limits, that which is a science-based, most of it, and we can go through it. But don't go do your practice, and sometimes in the hospital, for example, people actually, okay, I'm exposing someone to radiation at CT, for example, and they say, okay, we should not be exposed this patient. Said the dose, he said, the dose is very low. But you are actually you are violating the rules because you're exposing a patient that he doesn't need to be exposed. There's no good justification for this, even if you are actually following the ALARA principle. That is one of the important principle of this. In educational system, education programs, most of the conferences, meetings, programs, whether we attend, we are actually sitting in this area. We are focusing on this area. We rarely go to this area. I know it's not only the governmental regulatory work, but also as a radiation protection specialist that we have to take into consideration this one. because this might also contribute to the reduction of those to the public. Thank you very much.